act and do all kinds of things to make sure he had your attention. And so a lot of the things, including that, I thought were his setups to make sure that people, you know, felt that if they weren't there, they had missed something, or to make sure people would come to the next time to see what they might miss. I think, you know, I thought he was trying to instill in us an excitement about service, because anything that you do 4 or 5 times a week could become exceedingly boring. And so I think he worked really hard to not have us be bored. And I think that because of that, I overlooked a lot of the things that, looking back, were red flags.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when I know that you have the gift of hindsight now, and I hear that from a lot of the survivors is, you know, well, I wish we would have had this hindsight, you know, then. But so for any of these other red flags, what was your process when any red flag would hit? Or, I mean, it's not just you, it's, you know, I've heard other survivors explain, well, we knew it was kind of just the way Jones was, so it didn't alarm us to get out, you know, which happens in dysfunctional families. It happens, you know, it's your normal, so you don't expect the worst. So what was your thought process when any red flag would come up? Did you, just kind of blow it off, or?
Well, I think putting People's Temple in a historical perspective, one of the things that never happened before Jonestown in recent history was that a leader had his followers commit suicide. So there was no point of reference that I could say, oh, yeah, remember last year they had that cult leader who did this and, 40 people died or 80 people died. There was nothing in recent history that I could count on that would have given me any insight that would kind of broaden out my view. And because, I met Jim Jones, and at the time I was impressed with him. His wife seemed to look at him lovingly. He had really an awesome, wonderful family, and he had children, who would change their names to Jones so that they could be part of his family. He seemed to be universally respected, and that was, of course, everything that we saw. That wasn't the reality, and we found that out afterwards. But what was the public persona was somebody who was much loved. And so really there was never a time that I could imagine that he would take our lives.
Sure, and thank you for explaining that. I know that's a harsh question, but, it's something I see a lot of people asking is how could they have followed this man? Well, first of all, your programs in place and the people and the diverse group of people that you have. And, it just seems like, I've listened to him speak in the early days, and just everything about it seems like a wonderful group, a wonderful program that you're actually out there helping and not just sitting in a church congregation and hearing it preached. You're actually putting it in practice. So I just wanted to make that clear to those people who say, how could they have followed a man like this? That's how. You actually wanted to put yourself out there and make a difference. And, that's important. I was raised in a Baptist church, so I heard a lot of preaching, but I never saw programs actually being put into motion to help the community, to help people around us, So that's always intrigued me about People's Temple and, the amazing things that you guys did do in terms of helping the community. So,
one thing that I just wanted to mention, I was an atheist when I went to People's Temple. I wasn't looking for Christ or God or a church or anything. I had been an atheist since I was about 10 or 12 years old, so I was not looking for that. So when I went in with a really critical eye to see, okay, what are they actually doing? I don't care what they're saying. What are they actually doing? And when I looked to see what Jim was doing, it confirmed everything that I thought, that he was a wonderful leader, because he brought together people of all races, of all economic status, of all education. He brought us all together, and as a creative force, we had all that power and strength because we had all those brains that were focused on such different aspects of things. So it just, really enriched our community, and we got so, just united behind this effort with all of our different strengths. Mm-hmm. It was just a wonderful kind of a free-flowing movement forward. And so I saw it happening. So that's, I put him to the test. Did I see it? Was it happening? Yes, it was happening.
So what was your perspective on his quote-unquote healings? I know that, a lot of them were fake, but I have heard people say that some of them to this day are still unexplained.
I would never believe that. If somebody else told me, who was a linear thinker like me, if somebody else told me, I would never believe it. But I'm absolutely sure that he did heal people. And a lot of them were phony. A lot of them were his personal secretaries and mistresses. A lot of them were the zealots like me, in the meeting. But I was a greeter on the door. And so every year, every meeting, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for 7 years, I was pretty much on the front door of the meeting house. And every day I would talk to people who were healed the previous week or month or year, and they would confirm again to me how wonderful their life had become because he had healed them of arthritis or chronic headaches or, cancer or different things. And I heard it enough over 7 years from people who were not his, favorite, mistresses and secretaries, which he had a lot of. They were not those people. They were people of the community who had no reason to continue lying if it wasn't the case. So I'm absolutely sure he did do healings. I know that many, many of them were arranged, and more so as he got more exhausted with his schedule and his following his own urges. But at the beginning in particular, he did definitely do healings. And, if I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed it.
Sure. Yeah, I've heard one story in particular that I won't mention it here or names because, that's up to the person to describe it. But, this person had no reason to say, that it was true, but that his daughter had been healed, and he wouldn't have believed it either, but he saw it with his own eyes. And the healing was actually corroborated by a doctor, so it was, the doctor was stunned, but it came back and it was, test results came back and she was fine. So, I agree with you on that from what I've read and heard. So after the deaths, you heard about them while you were in Georgetown. How long were you kept in Georgetown before you were allowed to return to the States?
Well, when the people in Jonestown were dying, Jim sent a coded message into Georgetown, and he gave it to Sharon Amos, and he explained, gave her the coded message that people in Jonestown were dying and people in Georgetown needed to also. And so Sharon got the message. I was in the house in Georgetown, which was 24 hours by boat from Jonestown, so a long way away, not, accessible. And Sharon sent me to get the basketball team that was going to be competing in an international competition. So I went across town and got Jim's sons and some of the other people on the basketball team and brought them back. And Sharon met with them privately in the upstairs back bedroom and explained that Jim said it was time for all of us to kill ourselves. And Stephen Jones, who was only 19 and who was Jim's son, said, absolutely not, we're not doing it. And so Sharon tried to persist and say, Jim has given the instruction. And Stephen stopped it all and said, we're not doing it. That's over. We're not following him to this. Let me go to Jonestown. I'm going to stop it, but we are not doing this. And so Stephen stopped it at the house before it even got out to the rest of us in the house. There were about 40 of us. So eventually Sharon and her kids were the only ones who did die outside of Jonestown and, Port Kaituma, where the airport was. Sharon did kill her 3 children and herself. And the rest of us didn't know anything about it until we came home after an event and the police were there. So we were put under house arrest. And the Guyanese Defense Force is kind of like our Coast Guard. They're not intimidating. They're kind, young kids. And so we asked them why they were there, and they said, oh, well, we think we're here to protect you from yourself, but we're not quite sure. And so even though we were technically under guard, it wasn't really an intimidating setting, but, we had a lot of National Guard around with us. In fact, one of the women from the house eventually married one of the National Guard and stayed down in Guyana for a period of time until the marriage broke up. So it was kind of on paper it looked like we were guarded. On the other hand, we did develop friendships with the people who were cohabiting with us. After about a week, a rumor got out that the basketball team was really a hit squad. And it was so obviously just the opposite, because Stephen and many of the people on the basketball team would have done anything they could to stop everything in Jonestown. So it was just the opposite. But because they were like tall, young, muscular guys, they got this bad rap, or this rumor that they were a hit squad. So we couldn't leave Guyana until they had enough air marshals come down to Guyana to get us. And at one point, they let all the seniors and the women and people who didn't look, vicious and didn't look like hit squad members, they had them go home, and I could have gone home, but actually I had nothing to come home to. I never imagined that I would leave Guyana. I loved Guyana. I loved Jonestown. I thought, kinks would work out and things would get better, but I would never have left. So I stayed, and then eventually they had enough of the air patrol to bring the basketball team back, one air marshal with each member. And so we came back and we landed in New York, and we were held at Kennedy Airport by the FBI so that they could interrogate us in separate different little bungalows and places that we would be. So they held us there for about 12 or 15 hours. And then most of us got papers to appear before the grand jury in San Francisco. And then we were sent out to California, where we had to, went our separate ways for a bit.
Yeah. I've never actually heard that story about the basketball team either. So I was kind of putting it all together about them being the hit squad. I've heard that there were rumors when people did return that there was a hit squad, and that, there were some frightened people in, I forget where they were held. I don't know if it was Port Kaituma or whatever, but there were people that were frightened of some of them that had survived because there were these rumors that there was still a hit squad out there. So when you return to the...
I was just saying,
go ahead.
Not only did Guyana not know how to handle it, because Guyana is a peace-loving country, and when we got down to Guyana, the worst crime going on in Guyana was choke and rob, when somebody would come up behind you and put his arm around your neck and ask for your wallet. I mean, it was a very, one-on-one kind of that was their local crime. And then we brought this horrific event to them. So Guyana didn't know how to handle it. The world didn't know how to handle it. None of the survivors and none of the family members and none of the people back at home could even fathom what happened. And so I think that, when you're trying to grasp some clue or get some footing, all kinds of crazy things go around. And so it's just because we didn't have any facts, we didn't have anything to justify or to understand. So I think that a lot of the things that happened right afterwards, including some of the books that were written that have been totally, that were totally fiction, all those things went to muddy the waters to try to figure out what happened.
Yeah. So when you did return to the U.S., how long did it take you to get back on your feet? How did you survive? And you didn't have any family to return to, is that correct?
Well, I had my